Hey everyone, this is Baphometrix. I'm working in the early stages of a song and I was about to do something interesting with Bitwig's ability to manipulate multiple outputs from some of your VST plugins like Kontakt, Maschine, VPS Avenger, in ways that can save you a lot of workflow speed. And I'm in the very early stages of a song. This is not even really super looping yet. I've just been testing a few ideas out, making an intro that sets the tone for a song I want. This is just early tracks. There's not much to it yet. Have a little placeholder drop here starting at bar 29. Just a super placeholder. Take a listen real quick just to show you what the song's about, and then we'll dive into the thing I want to show you. And nothing here is leveled. This is all, you can see my volumes are all nearly zero across the board. Okay, so you may have noticed that these clips are all MIDI clips. These are all instruments, and my MIDI clips have different names on them, and there were literally different sounds playing, like for this track here. This was a completely different sound or preset than this one, and this is being done with what Bitwig calls an instrument selector rack. These are really nice. You can do this in Ableton by adding chains in a group that you've, you put in a synth and then you group it, and then you add chains to the group, and you can put different synths on each chain and pick different presets for each synth, and then you can do an automation lane where you jump back and forth between each chain in the group. And Bitwig does it the same way, but they have a first class kind of container for that. What's kind of nice about the Bitwig way of doing it is that every one of these rows or chains has its own unique index number. Like this is index 1, index 2, index 3, 3, and so on. And when you do automation, the automation lane is very helpful in that it tells you which exact index number and even the title that you've given the chain. It displays it here in the automation. So it's very easy to set up automation where you want to swap around between different presets as you go, and you can easily see it and check it in the automation lane. Here's another one where I do transition 1 from this instrument selector. This loads up transition 1, and then over here this loads up transition 2. And what's really cool about Bitwig that Ableton doesn't do is if for some reason, if I were to take this clip and butt it up right against this other clip, if this preset has some sort of tail on it that wants to ring out even when you stop the MIDI note, Bitwig will make sure that this rendered audio actually rings the tail out all the way, even though it's flipped over to the next preset here and is playing a completely different preset. So it kind of like actually renders the audio on the fly and continues to play it out, even though it's flipped over and started playing a completely different MIDI preset in a different synth instance, which is just totally cool. So you can make some really seamless blends of things. Okay, so that's not what I wanted to show you. I just thought you might be interested in that. What I want to show you today is in this drum MIDI, I was testing out several different drum patterns that I developed in VPS Avenger, just because the sequencer in VPS Avenger is pretty cool. Let me show you how that works. And there's a tiny little bug with VPS right now where it doesn't really remember my interface size as I go. So I've got a synth here. Oops, let me make sure I've got the right one. Yeah, Cyberstraction. Although I actually think I ended up using a different one in here. Time, setting the interface size. VPS is huge. This is going to be the easiest for y'all to read. So VPS Avenger is kind of like Maschine. It's this synthesizer that's way more than just a synthesizer. There's tons of different oscillator types. You can add multiple oscillators with the plus button, but it also has a kind of drum oscillator, basically a drum machine built inside of Avenger. And it's pretty cool because you can test out lots of different preset beat patterns. And then the pattern editor here in this drum sequencer view is actually really easy to work with and pretty versatile. So a lot of times I'll test patterns in here and I'll maybe start with a preset and tweak it, or I'll just develop something entirely new in here. There's tons and tons of drum kit sounds and so on. So this particular patch that I'm playing sounds like, sorry, I got to do this to you one more time. Let me just solo this track. Here. Get the interface where you can see it. I usually run the interface a little smaller and then it doesn't do this buggy thing. So here's the drum pattern, basically. Okay, nothing too fancy. But the thing is, I don't want to have to do the mixing for the drums inside of Avenger and then leave the whole thing kind of like one lump in my DAW that I can't really process well, because I like to pay really special attention to the exact level my kick drum's hitting at, the exact level my snare is hitting at. I like to look at transients and mess with transients by adjusting them with compressors or expanders. Do all kinds of processing to really make the kick drum and the snare drum hit right in the total mix. So I don't like using the drums inside of Avenger like this and just trust that they're all going to sound good, even though I can mix them independently here. There's like a mixer just for the drums, and I can do some simple adjustments here, but I still can't get at the individual processing for the kick drum or the snare and the clap and the second snare and so on. I can't get at the processing. This is what it looks like in Bitwig as I'm mixing it. If I go to the mixer view, okay, there we go. So here's the channel that I've soloed right here. All right, it's just one channel. I can't do much with it except adjust the volume and the pan, right? And there's this little set of arrows that will expand what's inside this thing, but this is just a representation of the instrument selector. And then the tracks that I see under here are just representations of the individual different instances of VPS Avenger that are inside this instrument selector. So even here, I can't do anything except adjust the volume as a whole of this entire VPS Avenger instance. And that's just no good, right? So what I'm going to do is take advantage of the multi-out capabilities for VSTs that Bitwig has. And if you look down here at this instance of VPS Avenger, you'll see this little set of arrows and it shows the multi-out chain selector. So I can create chains really quickly for all the multi-outs by clicking this. And it's kind of got a nice functionality. I can add one chain at a time, right? I can do this if I want to, and it's just walking through the internal set of available multi-outs from the VST. But that's kind of slow, right? That's a pain in the ass. So let's delete this. You can also just say add all the missing chains. So if I click that, I'm going to get a chain for the master output from Avenger. I'm going to get 4 auxiliary outputs, or auxiliary buses, if you will. And then down here, you're going to start seeing chains for each of the 12 sounds in the drum kit. So there's 16, 17 chains altogether in here, the master, 4 auxes, and 12 drum sounds. Now, as soon as I add these chains, you'll notice that up here in the mixer row for this one instance of VPS Avenger, I now have a little drop-down arrow, and if I click that, it's going to show me individual mixers for all of the internal chains inside that VST, right? Here's the master, here's the 4 auxes, and here's the 12 drum channels. Now the problem is if I play, I'm still only seeing the master output. I'm not seeing anything on those individual outs. And that's because, just like with Kontakt or Maschine or VPS Avenger, you have to go into the VST and reroute its internal outputs to different places, because by default, in VPS Avenger here, for example, back to 100%, if I go to the mixer for the drums, and I go into the drum mixer, this little button at the top is where you set the output for each channel. And by default, they're all going to the master effects bus. This is kind of like the master track or master bus in Avenger. Like every oscillator here might go to one or more FX buses, and then the FX buses down at the bottom by default go to the master FX bus by default. And then of course all the individual drum tracks by default also go to the master FX bus. So this bus right here, this master FX, is the thing that we actually saw over in the DAW playing. That's the master. Now, what I want to do with these drums is separate out my kick drum and my snare drum, and then kind of stem out my percussion into one single channel or stem. And then I want to put all my cymbals in another kind of stem. Okay, so I don't want to have 12 different tracks to mix. I want to have 4: kick drum, snare, percussion, and cymbals. So let's walk through these and see what they sound like. Here's the kick drum. Oh wait, I have to do it from here. You can see from the note number, you can see which actual drum type it is up here. This is the actual sample that's being loaded. But if I walk through these, here's the kick drum. Here's the rim shot, which isn't actually being used in this particular pattern yet. Here's the snare, or one of the snares. Here's a clap. And this snare seems to stack the claps and snares together in some cases for a brighter sound on the backbeat. So I'll probably want to stem both of these out as quote unquote the snare, or maybe I'll use separate outputs for them so I can blend them the way I want. And we can just walk up the rest of these: percussion, cymbal, cymbals, nothing fancy. I'll probably replace these sounds as I get further on in the song, but for right now I just want to be able to level them the way I want. And especially I want to set my kick drum and my snare drum to the gain staging points I like, so I can level everything else to match that gain staging. So let's just do it. The way you do this is you go to the mixer and you just decide where you want to route these things. Now I'm going to take the kick drum and route it to the channel called kick drum. I'm going to take the rim shot and route it to, I'll keep rim shot, snare, and clap on their own separate channels. So I'm just going to do this one-to-one. That's snare 1, this is clap, and here's snare 2. I'll keep that separate too. But now the rest of these are either percussion, see, like after the kick drum, the rim shot, the snare, the clap, then we get into percussions and hats. So I'm going to take this one and stem them together. And I'm going to do that by sending them to FX1. So I'm sending them to this bus right here called FX1. And then I'm going to take this one, the other percussion, percussion 2, right here at the bottom. I'm also going to send this to FX1. Then I'm going to come over here and make a new FX bus by clicking this plus sign. That's going to be FX2. And I'm going to take all of the remaining cymbal sounds, the closed hi-hats, the ride, the open hi-hat, and the crash, and I'm going to send those to FX2. Okay, so I've rerouted all of these. None of them are going directly to the master anymore. And I have two stems. FX1 is my percussion stem, FX2 is my cymbal stem, and then the kick drums and snare type sounds are all going to individual channels, so I can blend them exactly the way I want, and maybe do special processing on them. So with that done, I really don't have to do anything else inside of Avenger. And if we play this back now, you can see we're getting signal where we would expect. Let's move this over there. Now what I'm not getting is aux1 and aux2, and that's because, see, one more time, I'm getting the bass drums and the snares and all the things that I individually bust out here, but I'm not getting aux1 and aux2, and that's because I forgot a thing. Fortunately, it's real easy to figure all this stuff out when you see it. In aux1, I have to send it not to the master FX, but also send it to the aux1 output. I should say the FX1 group I'm going to send to aux1. And then the FX2 group I'm going to send to aux2. And now we should be seeing those on their individual mixer tracks right here. Okay. So here's our cymbals. And now, of course, I can solo. Okay. And so this will allow me to now set individual levels. And for example, I like to set my kick drum at -12, and that's kind of the anchor for my entire project gain staging. So let's do that real quick. Right now my kick drum is hitting at -6.1, and you can see, you know, this whole kit is going over 0, and my master track isn't quite going over 0, but if I were to add all the other sounds, it would be. So that's why I want to do some quick and dirty gain staging, even though I'm very early in the project. So I need to drop this about another 5.9 dB. So let's do -5.9 on a kick drum, double check it. Okay, so now the kick drum's hitting at 12. I like to make my snares also match my kick drum at first. Later I might adjust that. Now I'm doing kind of a combined thing. I want the snare and the clap, they hit together at the same time a lot, so I can't put each of them at 12 or they'll be too loud. So instead, I'm going to solo both of them. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. I'm going to solo both the snare and the clap that are stacked together. And I'm going to watch what level they hit on the entire drum bus here. Okay, see, they're pretty loud. They're hitting up to 2.5 dB. So I want to drop this, 9.5? I'm going to take both of them down the same amount. Yeah, let's take them both down to 9.5. Oops, I forgot. It doesn't work like Ableton. I'm still getting used to this stuff. Let me set this back at 0. The way Bitwig works, if you want to adjust the faders on multiple tracks at the same time, is you select both tracks and then you use the inspector over here to drop the volume. So here I'm going to drop them down -9.5, and you're going to see both the faders pull down as soon as I hit enter, right? So I could slide this up or down, or just, you know, put in specific values. but that's how you do multiple faders at the same time as you use the inspector over here. Let's set that again, -9.5. Okay, so now I would expect the summed amount to equal -12 over here for the snares. Okay, so I'm getting what I expect for the snares. So let's turn off all my solos. Oh, what did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? I haven't remembered all my shortcuts yet. No, not you. No, not you. You? Nope. Okay, I don't know what's going on. Just turn those off like that. Back here and just solo this guy. Okay, so now I can hear that my snares and percussion are too loud relative to the kick. I'm sorry, my cymbals and percussion are too loud relative to the kick and snare. So let me just pull those down by ear. That's probably where I want it. Okay, so that's a good basic kick and snare starting point for my gain staging. And I've got the cymbals and percussion blended in roughly where I want them to start with. And now, of course, that makes leveling the rest of these tracks a little bit easier. So let's just do some quick and dirty leveling in this section. I'll uncollapse all of this stuff. I don't really need it anymore. Okay, that we only have a few faders to work with. I'm going to use my push to do this final bit of leveling. So let's see what this section sounds like. Right now I'm just leveling these two sounds together. This track's muted. You don't need to hear my terrible scratch vocals. I'm having a professional vocalist do this part for me. Name is Baphometrix. Whoops. Oh, you weren't supposed to hear that. Yes, that's my terrible voice. That was just a scratch vocal for my singer to do her tracking later. One more time. Okay, next section. Let's go ahead and set this one up. And what's going on here? Should be hearing you. Solo. Let's try it again. Feels too low. Why does that feel too low? Some automation going on here. No. What's with you? That's why. This is adding a lot of energy to the drums, so this by itself is pretty wimpy. I probably need to bring this one down a lot more. And I don't want to blow your ears out, so I'm not going to turn up my master yet. Let me just do this in my own headphones. next section over here. Yeah, super loud, sorry. Let's take you down now. Okay. That's good. Let's check you. You. Oof, way too loud. Okay, so I've got everything roughly down where I want it. Let me flip over to the master real quick and take a bit of adjustment I'd done off. And let's double check all this again. Start from the beginning. Now let's start from here. Still a little too loud. That's about right. Let's check the beginning of the song. And if you're wondering why all the volume knobs are popping things up and down here, that's me using my push to adjust a lot of this in mixer view. Intro, turn around a little louder. Okay, so I basically have my gain staging set up correctly now, where everything's anchored around the kick and snare. Like I said, later in this song, I'll probably go a few steps further, and I'll probably actually export all the MIDI for these patterns out and actually export all the drum sounds out and put them in a drum rack, and then probably even replace them or layer those sounds up some more. But this is just a good starting point for writing the song arrangement quickly. And this is why I like Avenger. So just to kind of foreshadow that, if you're curious how that's done, it's very easy in Avenger to export the MIDI for your drum pattern. You just go down here and right click and you can export that exact pattern to MIDI. So then I can make variations of that MIDI, but for now I'm just going to use this one pattern over and over in the early songwriting stages. And then getting the actual drum sounds out. Oh, stop that. If I want to get these actual drum sounds out, that's a very simple process. I basically just I have a special MIDI pattern I load up. I'm not going to do it now, but where do I do that? It's been a while since I've looked for, I have to go find my user drum kit, my user sequence patterns, but I have a pattern loaded up that basically just plays every sound for a half a bar. It's just like a little staircase step of notes going all the way up about this far. And it literally will just play each sound like one hit for a half a bar, then another hit for a half a bar, then another hit for a half a bar, and so on. And it just gets, that's enough space for the tails to ring out on any of the drum sounds. And then I just take that one audio clip and I slice it into a drum rack, and then everything's matched up with my exported MIDI. So it's really a very simple process to get all this out and make a custom drum rack, starting with the actual sounds that came out of VPS Avenger. And then you can replace those individual hits if they're just not working in your final mix, or you can take a sound that's weak, like a snare that's not cutting through well enough, but you like the basic timbre of it, and then you can layer other things into it to make it sit better in the mix. So that's much further down the road. Hope you found this useful, and I'll see you next time.